Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on today's autumn release webinar. Today, we're going to be going through Compucare builds 827, 828 and 829. As you can see from this slide, we have released a new build of Compucare containing lots of new enhancements roughly once a month. These are coming out from our development team every 6 weeks now, and because of the advances we've made with our automation testing in our QA department, we are releasing pretty much every 6 weeks now in terms of a signed off build to put out to the customer base. So let's have a look at today's agenda. Today you've got Imogen Dawson and myself who will be taking you through a variety of topics. I'm going to start out initially with some slides just to go through some of the harder to demonstrate items, and then I'll go into the Compucare system to show some of the new enhancements in action. This column on the left-hand side of the bullet points there is pretty much what I'll be covering. We expect the webinar is going to take around 2 hours, so halfway through we'll take a quick coffee break. We'll let you know when that happens, and then Imogen will go through the topics on the right hand side again, going through the Compucare system. So as I say, there will be a break, and we are recording this should anyone need to step away and want to come back and review anything later. And there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of this webinar. Okay, so let's get started. So looking at some of the general improvements that we've made to Compucare over the last few builds, we've been able to introduce something called Filestream for patient attachment storage. So what does this actually mean? So Microsoft issued an end-of-life notification for SQL Server 2008, and we informed everyone about that just over a year ago. And so what this has meant is that as we've now started to support the later versions of Microsoft SQL Server and not having to support the more legacy ones, that we can start to leverage some of the APIs that are built into SQL Server. So Filestream essentially is a way of storing patient attachment data on the file system rather than within the Compucare database itself. So why have we done this? So the first thing that it's allowed us to do is it's allowed us to remove a 2 GB file size limit that we had. So when you would go into Compucare to the patient attachments area and would go to add an attachment in, usually a scanned document and things like that, you had a 2 GB limit, and that was absolutely fine. What we now have as more clients are moving into turning the patient area into a full EPR for the patient is that we have sites that are wanting to upload audio files or even video files from theatre, and of course those can be quite large if we're talking about video files. So again, by moving across to Filestream, it means that we're able to start storing and streaming much larger videos. Because of this, what we've done is in the front end of the system, you may see it pop up now and again, depending on the size of attachment that you're adding. Whenever an attachment is added, a progress bar is now shown to show you the progress that's being made as the attachment is added into the file store through SQL Server. So again, this is just to show you that something's going on rather than it looking like the system's hanging. Likewise, when we go to open an attachment or when we go to download an attachment, you'll get a progress bar as well if it's a particularly large video that you're trying to open. So it does have improvements. Attachments are quicker to open because we're using the dedicated APIs within SQL Server, so they have much better memory handling than we would have. And the other thing that this introduces is quicker recovery times. So instead of storing large attachments into the Compucare database and that Compucare database growing up to be several hundred gigabytes or even a terabyte and things like that, essentially those attachments will now be on the file system, and it means that your overall core Compucare database for your bookings and patient details and things like that is much smaller, so much quicker to restore in the event of any disaster recovery situation. So what does this look like? Under the System Settings app, which you'd have access to as a system administrator, we've got a new option shown there on the screen called Use Filestream for Attachment Storage. Mine's currently toggled to No. If I wanted to switch that on, I would firstly have to enable Filestream on the SQL Server, and then there would be a script to run against the Compucare database itself to turn that on. So I think all we're doing here is telling you that we've made this change for any customer that may want to start making use of this new storage technology. And what we'd suggest is that you contact our support team for advice on setting it up. Okay, so moving on to another item that we've been working on. So we've made a change to the way that our SHAC server credentials are cached. So let's just go over briefly what SHAC is. So firstly, when you double click that icon on the desktop, SHAC is a service that we've got running on your server to tell that icon on your desktop for Compucare where to go and find the database for Compucare and what server it's on. It also controls what databases you have access to as a user. So again, not all users get access to the UAT environment and things like that. And it also periodically phones home to StreetsHeaver to do a license check to make sure that you're a valid customer. So what have we changed? What we've changed is the way that it caches the credentials on individual user PCs and laptops. So currently that is being done at user level, which means that if I was logged onto my laptop using Compucare and if the SHAC server was to go down for whatever reason, I'd have a few days grace where it would use cached credentials to be able to allow me to still find the Compucare database, assuming that the SQL server was still there. What would happen though is if Imogen was to log on to my laptop, she's never logged on here before and those credentials just wouldn't be there. So what we've done is we've changed that to be held at machine level now so that any user logging on to the PC would have those cached credentials. And the other thing that we've done is extended the cache. Instead of being a 5-day cache to ensure that you get your SHAC server up and running, we've extended that to 30 days. So again, there should be absolutely plenty of time to restore the service, which doesn't normally take long if ever this was to happen. So what does this look like in practice? When your users log in, if it's using cache settings, you'll get messages similar to the ones shown above. And as you get closer to the expiry days in terms of that 30-day limit, again, it will start to tell you that. So we can't really see that this is something that happens all that frequently at all, but it was just put in place to allow a little bit more redundancy in terms of a little bit more grace in terms of you still being able to access Compucare whilst IT sort out whatever issue there is with the server. So again, there is a way of setting this caching up, and if anyone wants to look at that, you're welcome to contact our support team for some advice on how to set that up. Okay, so moving away from some of the server-based pieces, one of the changes that we've made is around SMS messaging. So again, as an administrator, you've got access to the Patient Settings app, and we've added a new toggle in here, which is shown in the middle of the screen there. And it basically means that when you key a mobile phone number into a new patient record or an existing patient record, it would automatically toggle the patient's preferred notification method to be SMS. So this is just taking a few clicks out of the process and making sure that all patients by default are signed up to receive reminder text messages and so forth. So I thought whilst we were on here, because that was quite a simple change, it'd be worth us just going through what messages Compucare can send. So we've always had for a good while now the appointment confirmations as they're being made. We've had any updates, any cancellation messages and moves, and we've had the automatic reminder that goes out 24 hours before, 48 hours before, that tells you that, remember you're coming into the hospital. More recently, though, we've introduced a few other reminder types within here. So we've got combined reminders. So for patients that have multiple appointments on the same day, instead of bombarding them with multiple text messages, we can send them a combined message to roll all of those up together. And likewise, since COVID came along, there's been a lot more telephone appointments and patient video consultation appointments. So again, we've introduced non-face-to-face templates as well, so that you can have some slightly different wording to enable you to really make it clear to the patient that this is going to be a telephone call or an online meeting, rather than them expecting to come into the hospital. And the last one on here, again, we've had for a while, is just clinician notifications. So if your clinicians want to know if an appointment has cancelled sort of last minute, or if they want to know when an urgent report is back from the labs or the laboratory, again, they can get a notification around that type of activity. So just a small change we've made to the patient record, but hopefully just improving the use of SMS overall. Okay, so FMD compliance, we've just got something that we need to highlight here. So what is FMD? This effectively is only for the private hospital clients that are using the Compucare pharmacy module. So FMD was something that came out of the EU, which was to ensure that medicines received into the hospital were barcode scanned and checked against a national database. So what has changed? The issue that we've been notified of by SecureMed, who are the organisation responsible for running the national database that these drug checks are made against, is that because of Brexit, there's no guarantee that that will be a requirement after the 31st of December this year. It's all reliant on the UK-EU trade agreement, whatever that looks like. And again, we're probably not going to see for a few more weeks yet as to whether that includes the UK's participation in the Falsified Medicines Directive. If it doesn't, the FMD checking, the barcode scanning as you receipt each packet of drugs into the hospital is only going to apply to those clients that are in Northern Ireland. So why are we bringing this to your attention? Essentially, if the trade agreement doesn't include our the UK's compliance with the FMD legislation, then Compucare will be asking you to scan the drugs that you're receiving into stock, and you'll no longer have a need to do that. So what do you need to do about it? There are two options. One, we've made it so that in Compucare 829 you can disable the FMD barcode scanning. And you can just turn that off, and then Compucare will stop prompting you when you do your goods receipts in stock control. Or the other option is, as we appreciate it takes a while for customers to be able to load new builds of Compucare, is that you can contact our support team, who will be able to run a script on your pharmacy items to effectively force that toggle for the barcode scanning to be off. But overall, we'd suggest that you need to get up to version 29 into the new year. So I'm just going to put a link here just to, and again, we're going to share the video so you'll have access back to this, but this is where we're getting the information on this from at the moment, from SecureMed themselves and their news posts around Brexit. So again, you may want to watch that space as well. Okay, so just something I wanted to highlight around our customer portals. We have our customer knowledge base, and I'm not going to go into that now, but there's the link for it. But this is the area where we currently publish all the how-to guides or the manuals on how to use the common areas of the software, whether that's making bookings, crediting invoices and things like that. Nothing's changed there. But since version 8.27 came out, we have introduced the release notes online rather than as a PDF document within the download file. So this just means that the release notes are a lot more available to more users who may be interested in looking at them. And it also means that they're more dynamic than a static document. So what I'm going to do is just bring my browser onto the screen here. And I've already got this open. So when I go to this release notes area, effectively what I'm now able to do is, instead of looking at the release notes for 8.29 and 8.28 and 8.27, I'm now able to say, actually show me the difference between these two builds. So this is important if you're a client that's jumping from, say, 8.25 to 8.30 or whatever the numbers might be. It'll tell you all of the changes that we've made across those, instead of you having to go and look and digest 5 different documents. The other thing that we've done is we've made schema schema changes visible as well within the release notes. So the reason why we've done that is we've got a number of clients now that are querying the Compucare database themselves and populating their own data warehouse, combining Compucare's data with data from other systems that they're using within their business. So the schema changes are essentially where we've changed the field or format of a field within the Compucare database, or we've added a new table or moved a data item from one table to another for performance benefits and things like that. And so by publishing those schema changes, we're able to tell you of those structural changes that we've made, and you're able to adjust your data warehouse queries accordingly. So again, I've just got these selected here. I won't go into the schema changes, but you can see as you scroll down on here that it's listing all the various areas. And if I really was just interested in what are the changes in 827 to 829, and I happen to work in billing or stock control or something like that, again, you don't have to look at the whole of the release notes. You can filter this down and say, just tell me the billing changes, because that's effectively what I'm going to have to UAT as I go through and approve this to be put onto my live environment. So just swapping back to the release webinar, the next thing that we've done is we've made our development roadmap visible as well. So we get lots of requests from the customer base, from our user group, lots of ideas that we come up with ourselves around how we could improve the Compucare software, but that isn't particularly visible to the clients. So we wanted to change that. So there's a new web link there that you can go to, and this allows you to go and look at the content of future releases. So again, if I was to go across to my browser, I'm currently looking at the roadmap for version 8.30 on this site, and this tells me all of the items that have been allocated, the numbers of them, how big or small the job is, what stage it is in the process, or whether it's just planned or whether it's actually being completed. And there is a slightly different view with this same information. So if I went through this roadmap Kanban link at the top, it'll give me a chart showing what's being done, what's in progress, and what's still yet to be started and things like that. So this should give you a lot more visibility in terms of following your user story requests through the systems that we have here. You can track individual items. So if you want to look at the progress, you've been given a number by our support team for an enhancement request or for a bug, you can search for that in particular. And we also have this backlog area as well. So you may not just be interested in your own requests, you might be interested in what your peers have requested in certain areas as well. So if I was to maybe select attachments, that'll just go through and load. And there are a few here, and we can see that we've got an option for enhancing the attachment folders on the patient record to shrink and expand accordingly. So I think currently in the context of this particular one, the folders are all maximized by default. So again, you might want to vote for this if it was something that you really wanted. And again, we'll take that into account at each new release. And if I scrolled through to some other areas, maybe Charge Master or something like that. Again, there are a series of requests in here, and we can see there's something that obviously someone in stock control has asked for to allow for stock catalogs to be more easily imported. So again, if this is something that affected your organization, you could go ahead and vote for it, and we would then take all of that into account. So just going back to the presentation, the last thing I wanted to talk about was just bringing in this little notification icon at the bottom right there. We did start to use this a couple of years ago, and then we stopped, but it's something we're going to start using again shortly. So as an administrator, you may start to see these toast notifications sliding in when you first log into Compucare, and they'll just be to tell you that a new release is available, and here's a link to those online release notes that we just went through. So we just wanted to highlight that we were going to start using that again, just so that it wasn't a shock to anyone when they first logged in. Okay, moving on then. The next thing I wanted to cover was eDischarge. So Compucare already has an eDischarge form against its patient record. So when you're against an inpatient or a day case booking, when you right click against that or you go to the edit menu at the top, it's possible to get to a form called eDischarge. This form can be filled out, it can be signed off as being completed, and it can be either printed or emailed. For those clients that treat NHS patients, the guidance from NHS England is actually that you didn't ought to be sending discharge summaries in the post anymore, and it needs to be sent via a secure electronic method, which prohibits email. So what we've looked to do is use NHS Digital's service for being able to send these discharge summaries securely and electronically via their mesh service. So this allows the eDischarge form to be completed against the inpatient booking in Compucare, just as you would have previously. When this new functionality is switched on, it will look ever so slightly different, and I'll show that in just a moment. And that's because we're following the Professional Record Standards Body's advised headings for what that document should contain. It also allows the mesh service to look up the GP and practice information of the patient in order that you can direct the document to the correct practice. And where we are with this at the moment is version 8.29 enables this functionality. We've done all of our testing and QA on it internally, and we're happy that it does what it needs to. However, we are just awaiting sign off from NHS Digital. So for customers that are wanting to start using this functionality, you can't quite use it yet, but as soon as we've had that sign off from NHS Digital, we'll then let you know, but you will have to be up onto version 8.29 or above to start making use of it. So to try and show a little bit of what this looks like, this is the add form for the eDischarge summary against the patient record, and you can see there's a few fields there, and as I bring on a few more, we've got some boxes around some of the legal information about consents and tissue and organ donation and things like that. All the headings that have to be filled in as part of one of these discharge summaries. And again, any actions post-discharge for the patient, their carer or the GP, any post-op care notes and things like that. So then in Compucare, when you come to send this, just right-clicking a discharged patient within the inpatient bookings app allows you to select Submit eDischarge Summary, which then brings up a small box where you select the staff role of the person who's sending it. In this case, I've picked receptionist, but this could be one of the nurses responsible for discharge on the ward and things like that. This particular patient I used hasn't had their GP practice looked up previously, so we don't know where to send it. So we're confirming that we want to get Mesh to look that up as part of the sending process. And the author that's shown there is the clinician that's overall responsible for that eDischarge summary. So in this particular screenshot, that's the admitting clinician from that particular patient's admission. So again, really the piece with this is we wanted to let you know that it's coming because it's important for your compliance and then about how all clients start sending these discharge summaries on electronically. And we just wanted to let you know that it's in the process of being signed off, and we should be able to release it shortly. So one of the next things we wanted to cover was Microsoft Teams integration. So as we all went into COVID, one of the things that happened was that a lot more consultations were happening remotely with patients. And so we recognized this talking to our customer base. And what we looked to do was integrate Compucare with Microsoft Teams. So what have we done? We've allowed Compucare to be connected to your hospital's Office 365 admin account. So this essentially means that we can then allow Compucare to start scheduling Microsoft Teams video appointments with patients. We can do that from a central email address, so maybe reservations@hospital.com or whatever your domain might be. And it also allows the clinicians to be able to launch those consultations from Compucare or from the Clinicians View app within Compucare or the Clinicians portal, the website that we provide for clinicians and their medical secretaries. So what I wanted to do was just launch into the video here. So again, I'll just bring my browser up and we'll go into that. And I'll just hit play.
We're going to have a quick look at the Teams integration with Compucare. There's a few things to note in regards to the setup for this. If we go to our global settings, there's a new option called third-party scheduling settings. We can see here that it gives us the option to sign into our Azure Active Directory. This does need to be an admin account to make this work. And then it gives you a few options to accept and continue. Once we've done that, you can see that there's a toggle now here to enable Microsoft Teams scheduling. If we toggle that to yes, we get a few extra options as well. We have our meeting organizer. This would be the account whose calendar will be used to set up the appointments. It will also be the from email address that will be sent to the patients as well. We have the meeting subject format. This is the title of the event as well as the email subject that's sent to the patient. There are some wildcard options that can be used for the patient name and patient ID. There's curly bracket 0 for patient ID and curly bracket 1 for patient name. We just set that up and that should say the patient name when that's sent to them. And we have the invite email template as well. This currently works off of the outpatient SMS templates. And there's a toggle here to send meeting invites to clinicians. This will copy in the clinicians with their email addresses. If this is set to no, they still have the option to join into the consultation via the outpatient booking screen. And this.
So just stopping the video there for 1 second, just while we were looking at these settings, I think really what we've done is we've looked to centralize the scheduling, as I mentioned before, from a central account rather than having to hold details for each individual consultant's own email address to schedule from. And the other thing that we just wanted to highlight here was we've got the ability to invite, just as Stephene's video has been through, to be able to invite the consultants to the appointment, but that works exactly the same as, say, like a Microsoft Outlook diary appointment. So what it does do, if that option is toggled to yes, is it does expose the clinician's email address to the patient, because there's no way on a calendar invite to BCC people into that invitation. So although that in this example is currently set to yes, I think in reality what you'll do is you'll set that to no when you go to set this up, because I would imagine that you wouldn't want your patients to have direct email addresses for the consultants, but that the consultants will then be able to schedule the join the appointments from either Compucare itself or the clinicians portal. So I'll just press play again.
This is a simple sign out option to close out of it. If we save that now, the next thing that we need to consider is the contact types. So if we go to our contact types and edit one that's been set up already, I have my Teams video consultation. Once I've done all of the previous setup, I'll have a toggle come available on my contact types for schedule Microsoft Teams video consultation. I've got this toggle to yes. This is linked to our outpatient bookings. So I've saved that now, and let's go and add this to an outpatient booking and we can see how it all ties together. So I'm going to create a new booking, select my patient, my episode of care. I'm just going to set my clinician as myself at the moment. And here on the right hand side is the important section. We have an is face-to-face toggle. We want this to be set as no. Once we do that, we get the contact type become available and we can choose our Teams video consultation. We select save here, and this will then get picked up by the Compucare 8 service and fire off that email to the patient and the clinician dependent on the toggles that have been set up. So I should have received that email now. If I flick over to my emails, we can see here outpatient booking with my patient's name, and I've also got the option to join the Microsoft Teams meeting from here as well. This will be the same layout that is sent to the clinician. Should you have that toggle set to off though, if we go back to Compucare, you can see here at the top of the page there is the option for Teams consultation, or if we right click here we do get the option to join Teams consultation.
Okay. So as I say, this integration was first released in version 8.27, and we're encouraging customers to start to look at it in their test environments and give us feedback on it. We think it works quite well, and again, we've started to build it into the Clinicians portal, so the website that we give them access to. So you can see just underneath the My Next Patient banner there is a Join Teams link, so your consultants could join into those appointments remotely. And likewise, on the Clinicians View screen, we've got a Teams consultation button on the banner. So if it is a non-face-to-face appointment and it is a contact type of Teams video consultation, again, that will appear and the consultants can launch into it from there if they're using the main Compucare system. Okay, so that's enough of PowerPoint. What we're going to do is we're going to log into Compucare, and I'll start to talk you through some of the other new enhancements that we've added to the system. Okay, so here's my login screen. Let's log in. And I've now logged into Compucare. We're going to start out with a couple of easy ones just on the patient record. So what I'm going to do is go over to the patient area. I'm going to click on the search, and I'm going to go and search for my patient. So I'll part type my surname, go and find myself on the list, and it'll open up my record. So the first change that we've made is to do with the way that we are able to search patient attachments. Previously, it wasn't possible. So if I go into the Attachments app and open this up, we can see that I've got a number of attachments on my record. I've got some referral letters, I've got some registration forms, I've got some videos in as well in terms of things I might want to be storing. So previously, if you were looking for a document, you would have had to have clicked into the relevant folder, then sort of sorted it by the date range that you wanted to look by, or looked at the name of the document and hopefully found the one you were looking for. What we've done is just up on the right hand side here, we have added a new search feature. So as I click that, it'll come up and say, well, okay, do you want to search? And yes, I do. And maybe what I want to do is look at the file description, and we'll search maybe for blood or something like that. So could have come back with blood test results, but in this case, it's come back with a video to do with some form of vein repair or something like that. So again, we don't need the video, but just to show how easy it is to get into those. And the other options that we've put onto here are not just searching by the description, we can search by the date attached. So I could look at finding something if we knew the patient attended on a particular date and I wanted to look at any attachment to do with that date. Again, I could search, and what it will do is narrow down my list of results on the record. And the last thing we've done is to be able to search by the file type. So if we know that we're looking for a movie file and not a PDF file and things like that, again, we can start to do .mp4 or whatever the format might be. And again, it will then start to narrow down my search results. So just a quick little change, but hopefully makes this app more usable. This what we have seen is customers' number of attachments growing and growing. Okay, the next thing I'm going to look at is something very similar on correspondence. So I'm just going to go into a different patient. So we'll find Stephanie Grantham in this case. So there she is. And in the Correspondence app, what we've done is we've made it so that you're able to filter the correspondence that are included in this app. So as a lot of you are probably aware, whenever you send a letter to a patient, whether that's an appointment letter, whether it's a clinic discharge letter, an inpatient letter, a debtor letter, it gets archived into here. Likewise, the SMS messages that we discussed previously also end up in here. And any other document that you print and send to the patient also comes into here. So invoices, statements and receipts and things like that. So again, what we were finding was that this correspondence app was getting to be quite busy in terms of all the system generated correspondence that we've sent on to patients. And so we've put in a new filter pane, and you're now able to filter it down and say, I only want to look at invoices, and we could then go and reprint that if we wanted to do that. Or you could filter and say, I'm only interested in letters. Letters within a particular date range, and you can combine as many of these filters as you want, whether the letters are in draft format or whether they're finalized, or the ones we've struck off as, you know, shouldn't have been sent and things like that. The other things that we've done on the right hand side here is we've got another search option as well. So again, if I wanted to look for just my inpatient letter, I could filter my list right down to my inpatient letter, and if I wanted to reprint that, I could click onto it and it will just go and grab me the letter that was sent a few days ago. So just another nice little change to make that slightly more usable for users as we're getting more and more data building up in here. Okay, so I'm going to come away from patient records, and the next thing I want to have a look at is the person record. So one of the changes that we've made is around new and follow-up times for clinicians. So we've always had the ability to be able to store a particular clinician's new patient appointment time and their follow-up appointment time, but we've found more recently that this hasn't been granular enough. So if I go into here and search for Dr. Jones, my example clinician, and I'll just edit her record. And we'll not worry about her contact details. It's the clinician role at the top that we're bothered about. So as you're already aware, this already has their professional ID and their specialties and the treatment function services that they can offer and things like that. And over on the right, we've got the tick box saying that she can see outpatients in clinic, which is nothing new, but it's this section here where my mouse is just hovering that we've changed. So previously, this was just a couple of fields that said, what's the default time for new and what's the default for follow-up? So it would have been maybe 30 minutes for new, 15 minutes for follow-up. What we've done is we've extended this to a grid of data that Compucare can then go through to actually find the correct appointment length for a patient. So down at the bottom here is my absolute fallback position. I've got, if there's no contact type specified or any config up the top and there's no treatment function where I've overridden it, the defaults are just as I've given, 30 minutes and 15. What I've said is, on this particular other one that I've added, if it's a patient who's coming in for a knee problem, it's 35 minutes. Don't know why. In my example, they just take a bit longer. The reason why we've looked to change this is around the increase in the number of telephone calls and video consultations that are happening, which obviously may differ in time to a traditional new appointment based in the hospital. So if I wanted to add a new configuration here, I can say if the contact type is a Teams consultation and it's a new patient, then make it 20 minutes, or otherwise make it 15 if it's a follow-up or something like that. So again, this is all stored per clinician and I can add that into the grid. What we need to be aware of when you add these is just getting the order right. So this one with nothing specified always wants to be at the bottom, so that's the absolute fallback position that Compucare gets to in terms of if it can't find anything else, those are the times it uses. I'm obviously showing this on an orthopedic surgeon, but we've also had examples of this being used within areas such as physiotherapy. So you may have a physiotherapist who can see MSK patients, who can see sports injury patients, who can offer acupuncture appointments, and all of those would have a new patient appointment and a follow-up, but the times may differ depending on the service being offered. So again, by having this new grid of configuration here, this just allows you to suggest to your bookings users the correct amount of time to be booked for each appointment type. So I'll just press save on that and I'll hit finish on there, and let's have a look at this in practice. So going back to the home screen, we've got the patient scheduler. So I'll just open up the scheduler and I've got it currently pre-filtered to show me my orthopedic surgeons that are working within the month, and Dr. Jones happens to be working today for this demo, and let's try and book in at say 2 o'clock. So I would see a slot. Okay, I want to book a patient into here, and I could double click it and it would come up and say, okay, who's your patient? So if I just go through this and we'll search for, we might as well use my patient record, which is absolutely fine. So I'll find myself on the list, pick one of my endless episodes of care, and then what I can do is I can start to select the options that apply to this appointment. So is it new or is it follow-up? I've currently just clicked a 15-minute slot. If I say it's not, what's going to happen over on the right-hand side is it's going to use that configuration to say, well, hang on a minute, you've just told me this is a new patient. We're trying to reserve 15, which is what you clicked in the diary, but this should really be 30 minutes. Likewise, if I was to change this and say it was a Teams consultation, it's going to change that warning message and just tell me, well, actually, you've told me that this should be 20 minutes where you're doing a video consult. So we could just resolve that, and it will then go and reserve that time, and we can go through and finish the appointment. So what I'll do is I'll just continue with this, and whilst I'm doing this, I'll show another quick enhancement that we've added to the adding of the billing episode. So rather than being self-pay, which that one was, I'm going to pick Bupa, and it's going to pull up my default outpatient contract for Bupa. And over on the right-hand side, it's going to ask me to fill out lots of bits and pieces. So I could put in an authorization code. So I'm just going to use a dummy one here, and I am overriding the normal format of a Bupa one, so don't worry about that. And I've got an expiry date. So the change that we've made is if the expiry date for authorization is before the date of the appointment, so let me date that back a week and hit save, what happens is it starts to warn you that there's an issue here. You're trying to book an appointment outside of the authorization expiry date on that billing episode. So again, this is just to alert the bookings users that either they've misentered that, or that if that's carried forward from a previous appointment, they may be now having to go back to Bupa or AXA or Aviva to get extra authorization for the diagnostics or for further treatment and things like that. So let me just hit save on here, and that should put that appointment into the diary. And we'll just that will just come out of it. So the next thing that I wanted to go through was something that we've introduced for booking KPIs. So this is something that our clients that have treated NHS patients under contract have been doing for a little while. So there's always been the idea of a RTT clock that's running, that is the referral to treatment target that you're aiming for, and the idea of an overall breach date on that you never want to get to. So what we've introduced is we've kind of recognized that there are potentially at some of the hospitals KPIs that you want to hold yourself against anyway beyond your NHS care. So particularly as you're thinking of trying to attract NHS patients on long waiting lists into private care, if someone is a self-funding patient or a private insured patient, you may want to have targets that mean that you're booking those in quite quickly to appointments in order to give them a good level of service. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and register a new patient, and we'll just go and look at creating a Hannah Johnson or something like that. So we'll go through, we'll do Johnson, we'll hit search. There is no Hannah, so I'll hit new and we'll create a new patient. So we'll very quickly register this patient. Just enter all the fields that we need to enter. We'll just put in a GP on here, so Dr. Pardo, and that'll do us, I think. So if I hit save on there, the next thing I've got to do is create an episode of care. So this, I just wanted to start with a new clean patient for this example. And when I create the episode of care, the referral into the hospital, I have to select a referral source. So I'm going to say it's a GP referral of a patient that wants to go private. So what I can do, because I'm an admin, is I can edit this just to show you without going out to the code table separately. And over on the right-hand side, we've got a couple of new fields, which are the targets for the date of the referral to the first outpatient booking and the date of the decision to admit to the first inpatient booking. So I'm saying for this type of referral, I want to see them in an appointment slot within 7 days. And I also want to, after they've had a decision to admit, which might be a few days on from that, see them with it, offer them an appointment within 2 weeks. So this is just what I've configured on my system. Yours may be different. And we can go through and we can record the referral date. So I just need to put this into the past to show you how this functionality is going to work. So let's say I'm really tardy at getting my referrals entered. So we'll put it back to the end of October, 30th of October. We'll just quickly fill in who referred them. So Dr. Pardo, we'll put in the specialty it came into. Maybe it was a named referral and we'll make it go to Dr. Jones. Referred with hip pain or something more imaginative. Then we'll go through, we'll say it was a routine referral and that it's a potential surgical patient. Again, your values may differ. So when I hit save on here, we won't attach a referral letter. That's just standard functionality. Is when I go through and finish setting this up. So we'll say they're a self-funding patient. And we'll say they're a new patient. And again, it's going to tell me, well, you probably want to book half an hour. So that's fine. Let's just reserve that. And we can say patient attending, first appointment, re-hip. When I go to save that, it's now going to warn me, well, hang on a minute, you've said that you should have offered this appointment within 7 days, but actually you're now well beyond the 7 days of the 30th of October. So it's now asking me to record a deferment reason. So this field has just appeared. It only appears when there's a problem. And there's a new code table for deferment reasons that you can now populate. So in my system, I've set up the clinician was unavailable, so that's why we couldn't offer the appointment in the timescale. The hospital had no availability. The patient was on holiday, so it was their choice that they couldn't make an earlier date. So maybe I'll just say they were on holiday, and I can go ahead and I can save that. And we'll hit finish. So again, this is just a way that you're able to start monitoring any first referral to first appointment KPI and be able to report on that data. Okay, so the next thing we're going to go on to then is some changes that we've made in medical record tracking. So I've got a series of apps pinned here for my medical record tracking. We recognise that not all customers use these, tends to be more the private hospitals. But I've got a tile pinned here, which is for show me the records that need to be pulled from the file room to get ready for today's appointment. So at the moment, we've got just one, and that is the Hannah Johnson record that we've just booked for this afternoon. So again, it's saying, it was reserved by Stuart because I'm the one doing the demo. It needs to go to Dr. Jones. It needs to get to the outpatient department. It needs to be there by 2 o'clock, and it's ultimately got to end up at consulting room 1. So for anyone who's using medical records, that's nothing new. Those reservations are fired all day long as your appointments are made, and then they stack up in here to tell your medical records file room colleagues to pull the relevant records. So a couple of changes that we've made in here. One is to enable barcode scanning. So if I was to go to checkout at the top here, you see we've now got this icon here for barcode scanning, and if I had a series of files that I'd pulled from the shelves and was now going to bundle up and get ready to send down to clinic, I could be scanning all of those to track them into the system, and this screen will just populate. I haven't got a scanner with me, so what I'm going to do is just check out this record as selected. So we'll mark it as prepared, and we could print some labels if we wanted to and things like that, and then we can go to checkout selected. So another change that we've made in medical record tracking is to be able to say, well, okay, someone has got this record ready from the file room, but ultimately, who is going to be taking it down to that clinic or where it needs to go? So we've got a new field here at the top called holder, and this allows me to specify who I've given it to. So I'm going to say that it's gone to Anna Johnson, who's one of my employees, and this is effectively allowing me to check that out. And what it will tell me when I go to my checked out records for today, just changing my filter, is that this has left the file room because it's at status checked out. It's on its way to Dr. Jones, and it's currently Anna Johnson that's got it on her trolley or in her hands, taking it down there. We've got a new button up the top here called Update Current Holder. So again, I could do that for the selected record, or I could do it using barcode scanning. And the barcode's available here, so you can do a mixture of the ones you see on screen plus any others. And I could change the holder, and I could say I've given that to Dr. Jones's medical secretary, who happens to be Imogen. So I could transfer it again and say it's now not with Anna Johnson, it's with Imogen Dawson. So again, I can update that record holder and it will just change it on here. Ultimately, I could then update it again and say it's now actually with Dr. Jones if I wanted to do that. So again, we could go and put it against Dr. Jones and say it has made it where it needed to be. And it's just going to track that all the way through. And there is an audit log here, which will tell you all the various steps that this has been through. I'll not drill into it because, again, you've seen me do it all. The last thing that will happen is either those notes will stay with Dr. Jones for a while, or they'll get moved back to the file room, in which case we've got the same functionality to check in from selected, and I can just check those back in and say that we're done with them. Again, with that barcode scanning enabled all the way through. And as soon as I check that in, that'll just drop off the list, and that's essentially it done. So the reason why we've done these changes are, one, to introduce the barcode scanning to make it much easier to bulk scan records and make sure you've got them all, to tick them off the screen. And the other thing is to make it much clearer who's moving those records around, and if they've been handed to a medical secretary before they make it to somewhere else, that they're actually with that person. So that's all I'm going to show in that area, and we're just going to have a look now at our location scheduler. So if I go back to my home area, and one of the issues that's been described to us is, if you want to know what's going on in clinic on a particular day or in theatre on a particular day, you can use the multi-scheduler app, and it'll allow you to pull theatre 1, theatre 2, your minor procedure room, etc. side by side, and you can kind of see, okay, Dr. Anderson's got this booked for today. And likewise, when I look at my consultation rooms, we can flip it over and we can say, okay, Dr. Jones has got room 1 booked, and we can see that she's got that appointment that we booked earlier into it. This filter pane on the left-hand side does allow us to select multiple dates, but you can see as you drag a week's worth of what's going on in my rooms for the week, it suddenly becomes quite hard to look at. You can see where the gaps are, but you can't see really who's got them. So we recognise that for employees that work in the outpatient or theatre areas where they need to be actually scheduling the consultant sessions in, that this screen didn't really work for them. It was good for what was happening for today. It wasn't so good for future planning. So what we've done is we've implemented a new screen. So when you search for it, because it won't be pinned on your system by default, there's a new app called Location Utilization Scheduler. You could search for it up here, it would find it. I just happen to have pinned it on mine. So as I go into that, what it's going to do is show me Theatre 1, Theatre 2, Theatre 3, with my dates across the top, and now it's a lot easier to see where I've got bookings and where I haven't. So over on the left hand side, just like all Compucare apps, we've got the options to be able to filter for what we want to look at. So in this case, I'm looking at my theatres, and I've added on the 4 areas that I'm bothered about. And over on the right hand side, I'm able to specify my time ranges, so mornings, afternoons and evenings. Obviously in your hospitals, these might differ ever so slightly as to when your theatres run up until, but this is just my example. So we can change how many resources we're seeing on the screen. So if I wanted to bring that back to just the next 5 days, it's nice and easy to look at. If I wanted to get 2 weeks worth of data on there, again, it's still quite legible. We can set it to auto refresh, so it'll update itself every minute. And this now allows me to really see what's going on. And again, I can do the same for my outpatients, and I can see what's happening with my room bookings. So if I wanted to move Dr. Jones on Friday from being in room 1 in the afternoon to being in room 4, I could drag that down just like you can on the other scheduler, and it'll say, well, is this just today, or are you changing her working pattern, or which room rather she's allocated to on a permanent basis? And you can say just this time or all the times. Likewise, if you have a consultant who rings up and says, I need to get a clinic in, when could you fit me in? You can come in here, you can look, you can see quite easily, well, actually, Saturday's completely empty, so let's get your Saturday morning clinic if it's that urgent, and you can add availability straight from here. So you can go through and you can pick a particular clinician, so we could go and find Anna Johnson, and we could say it's going to be from 12 till 5, which is what it's picked up from the scheduler, but maybe I'll say we're only going to do a 4-hour slot. And we can say what room it's going to be in, which it's auto selected. So I could then go through and save that and hit finish. And as I've done that, it's quite easy to put that in. As we hover over it, it gives me some more details about what's going on there, how much time is remaining and things like that. And there is some color coding on the side here. All of mine are green at the moment because I've not gone ahead and made a lot of appointments. But as there is a shorter amount of time available in here, they start to turn amber. And as there's no time available left in them, if the theatre session or the clinic's fully booked, they turn red. So again, you can start to see the ones that are really busy and the ones where there aren't very many bookings at all. So if ever you're thinking of having to rearrange a consultant's clinic, it will give you that data. And again, you could drill into the main diary system, the scheduler app, to go and look at that. Okay, so that's kind of it for outpatients. So the next thing that we're going to go and have a look at is inpatients. And really the first thing I'll do is just show you something on the inpatient side of something we've already looked at in outpatients. So we've put the same billing episode checks on for that authorization expiry date. So I'll do that. And we've also put the same admission to first inpatient booking KPI on as well. So what I'm going to do is just look for Robinson, I think, and Christine. So we'll just narrow that down. There we go. Here's my patient from earlier. And we'll pick the referral. And we can go through and start filling out some of this data. So let me put the billing episode in first, and we'll go through and we'll say it's a Benenden Society referral that we've had in, and the auth code is BEN 12345, and the auth code is at some point in the past again. So as I save that, we get that same warning coming up trying to tell us that there's probably going to be a problem here. So just showing that we've reflected that on the inpatient side. Likewise, as I go through this and finish off making this booking, so we'll say that she's going to have a hip replacement. We'll go through and say that that is going to be the hip and it's going to be the right hip and all the things we have to fill in. We can also look at saving that, I think now. We'll just resolve the number of nights as well, book it for 4 nights. And when I hit save on there, it's going to say, well, hang on, the decision to admit date, which is shown up here on the episode of care, was recorded in outpatients as an outcome that the patient needed to be booked for inpatient on the 18th of September. So we're well outside of that 15-day range that we were looking at. And so it's asking me to populate a deferment reason. So I'm just going to say the hospital had no availability, no theatre, no beds, or whatever the reason was. And then I can say why we haven't met that KPI. And I'll hit save. So the next thing that I wanted to show you was around letter printing. So we've made a very small change here, hopefully just to make things easier for the patient to be able to understand what it is that they've actually been booked in for. So if I was to print my inpatient letter here, it's going to go off and produce my inpatient letter. Yours may look different. And you'll see when I zoom in on it here, that one of the items of data I'm pulling through is the description of the procedure. This is what you've been booked to be admitted for. And in this case, it's primary total hip replacement with or without cement. And so what we're doing is we're pulling through the CCSD description. Now, the CCSD descriptions aren't that patient friendly. And so what we've tried to look at is, could we allow you to pull in patient friendly terminology to this letter? So I think if a patient got this one, they would understand that they were in for a hip replacement. But again, it's a bit wordy. So what we can do is we can come through from it and we can go to the code table for procedures. And as I go into here and search for my procedures, I can filter it down again to my total hip replacement. And I can fill in, which I've already done, an alias for it. So actually, rather than put this great big long description in with a code, let's just call it total hip replacement. And if you think about some of your other procedures, the one that always confuses me is cataract repairs. So the CCSD description of that is face emulsification of lens or without lens. And what is that? Fake emulsification. So again, you might want to actually put cataract repair into that one. So we're not going to be shipping these. We're going to leave it to you to term how you want to put your patient-friendly terminology in. But going back to that inpatient booking, what we can do is on the letter, because I'm an admin, I can edit the template for the letter behind the scenes. So let's go and do that. It's just loading here on my other monitor. So I'll just drag that across in a second. There we go. And in my letter, what I can do is I can put in another insert. So let me search for procedure. And we now have main plan procedure alias. So if I bring that in, and we'll just make it, put it in a different color just to make it more obvious. We'll make it bright green or something like that, and we'll hit save on there. So as I hit close on there, because I've amended that template, when it reloads, you can see now I can actually pull in this nice, easy to understand name for the procedure. So just a little change, but it's something you might want to change in your various letter templates, and it's something you might want to change in your procedure code table to put those friendly terms in. Okay, so we'll press finish. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to have a look at, staying with inpatients, was our bed board. So we have the inpatient scheduler, and this currently shows patients that are due in today and tomorrow. And there's Christine Robinson that we've booked in without a bed. And here's Gwen Anderson, who's in bed 110 at the moment, and what they're in for. This is really a scheduling screen. And a while ago, we introduced our bed board, which was meant to be more of a graphical representation of the ward, and was also meant to give the users of this screen more clinical information, so the nurses who are working on the ward and things like that. So the first thing that we've been asked to start showing is whether the patient is eating or drinking or not. So if we have a look at bed 108, you can see currently that we've got this NBM on there, which is nil by mouth. And so how that's appeared on there is when I go to edit my inpatient booking, down at the bottom here, we've got this nil by mouth date that I set when I admitted the patient. So I've said up until 3 o'clock, she can't have anything to eat or drink. As soon as I take that off, it then shows me a new toggle for is the patient eating and drinking. So if at the moment she's isn't nil by mouth but hasn't started eating or drinking, I can just save that. And on the bed board, it'll update quickly and that will now disappear. And then as I go back into it and edit that and toggle that switch on, and eating and drinking, save it and hit finish, it's then going to put that onto there. So this was just about putting some of the important information, some of the important checks onto the tile of this bed board around what's going on with this patient. So, of course, there are many other things that you want to check beyond the news score, which is shown here against Luke Johnson, and the eating and drinking and things like that. There are many other things that are done up on the ward. So one of the areas we were asked to enhance was around inpatient pathway tasks. So you can see here, I've got a little green icon at the bottom, and when I hover over it, it tells me it's inpatient pathway tasks. And you can see I've got 1 of 2 here, which is showing me that I've got 1 of 2 tasks completed. And I can see that when I look at the card for this patient, and it now has a new section on it called pathway tasks. And it tells me that the going home x-ray is done, but we haven't arranged the follow-up physio before we discharge them. So again, it's given me a list of tasks that I might need to do to get this patient ready for going home. So how this works is we initially introduced it in an earlier build as a manual form. So if I click on this 1 of 2, it opens a new screen. And if I wanted to add a new pathway task to Lucy Talon, what we could do is we could hit new and we could say discharge checklist completed ? And I could hit save on there and it will put it in there. And so when I come back off here, it's going to update this, say you've now only got 1 of 3. And as I open that card up again, it's going to tell me, well, you said you needed to do 1 of these, but it hasn't been done yet. And to mark those as done, what you do is you just click on the pathway task and you mark it as complete. Come away from it, and again that summary updates here and it also updates up here. So that was a very manual way of working with this, and what we realized was, well, these things are going to repeat time after time. There's going to be a core set of checks that you want to do. So if I come out of the bedboard screen and go up to the search bar here, I've got pathway, and I can look at my pathways. This was a table that existed previously, but what we've done is we've allowed you to add child tasks against certain pathways. So if I edit my HIP pathway here, it's saying, well, the things I want to have added to that patient record for me to check against are the x-ray, the physio, the checklist, returning property, all sorts of things. And if I go on to my standard pathway for, in this case, a female patient, I've actually added many, many more to it. So have we done a pregnancy test if it was applicable? Have we got the first observations? Has the patient been signed off for theatre by all the relevant parties and things like that? So how this works to get these onto an inpatient currently is if I come out of this, and what we'll do is we'll go to make a new inpatient booking. So I'll go on to here and I'll search for another patient, and I've got Holly Milner at the top here, who I've created previously, and I've got a referral for a T&O session going through. And if I edit this episode of care just to show you it going in, what I've done is I've set against the episode of care this care pathway, and it's the standard pathway or the HIP patient pathway and so forth. So when that's been allocated to the episode of care, you can see it's telling you here that the inpatient pathway tasks from the female version that I just showed you are going to be added as part of this admission. So let's just quickly go through and book this patient in again. So we'll use the same old procedure. And we won't bother with sites and laterality. We'll just make them self-funding, doesn't really matter in this case. And we'll put a bed plan in as well. We might as well admit them where we want them to go. So I want her to go into bed 10 because I know from the board that that was free. And I could put some notes in and so forth, but what we'll do is just hit save. We won't print a letter, but I will admit her now as well. So if we go through and do that, yes, we'll just do it as admitting at 9 o'clock this morning. I could use real time and change it to whatever the time is now, and we'll hit finish on there. So going back to the bed board and flipping my ward around when it loads up, changing me over to ward 2. I have Holly Milner booked in, and I have 0 of 11 pathway tasks allocated, and now all those pathway tasks are already there preset for me to go off and check off against. So again, it was just really trying to introduce something that allowed you to track much more of what's going on with that patient. I think in the future, we'll also look to extend these same pathway tasks to our ward app so that the handheld devices also alert the nurses to the things that they're meant to be completing. Okay, so the last enhancement that I'll show before the coffee break is something we've done around drugs. I could have had just a pathway task set up to say, have we given the take-home drugs to the patient? But for those customers that are using our pharmacy module, actually we can be a little bit more intelligent than that. So let's use this patient, Holly Milner, and let's actually go and prescribe her. So I'll pretend I'm the clinician now. So I'll go into her record and I'll add a prescribed item. So it will come through and say, let's say it's against that inpatient booking that we've just made. It's Dr. Jones who's prescribing in this case, and what's the item that I wanted to have. So I'll just pick some codeine, a linked to solution for some pain relief when she goes home. So the important thing here is this only works for the take-home drug. So again, we've got that toggle there. On the right, it shows you all the normal side effects and if she was allergic to it and things like that, or if there are any other complaints. None of that's new, and we can hit save on there. So that prescription has been placed, and when we look back at the bed board, nothing's happened. There's just a prescription down with pharmacy, and that needs to be fulfilled. So putting my hat on as the pharmacist, I've got some icons pinned here for items that are awaiting dispensing today. And so Holly Milner's drugs are now awaiting to be dispensed, and I can now mark those if I'm happy with them as being dispensed. So let's go ahead and do that. So it's saying that the person who's done this is Stuart, because that's the person that we're logged in as, and it's saying the date and time that that was done. When I go back to the bed board, again, flipping over to working on the ward, nothing has happened. Oh, there we go. It's there's a little grayed out icon against Holly Milner. So we've got a little pill bottle here, and when I hover over that, it's saying that the prescription's on its way, but it isn't yet ready. So just going back to what that pharmacy process might look like, if I look at the items that are awaiting dispensing today, right click the item, I've dispensed it, but someone's got to take that up to the ward for the patient. So I can go to checkout and I can say I've given that to either the patient directly, or I can say I've given it to a person. So in this case, I've got someone from pharmacy or from another department that's taking those drugs up to the patient. So I'm going to say Imogen's going to take those up for me. And again, we could barcode scan the items if we wanted to check them off. But now it's saying Stuart's dispensed it, but now it's with Imogen. So as I get up to the ward and look at that bed board again, it's still going to be grayed out because they haven't made it there. It's just saying who's got them. They're in transit at the moment. So the last thing that we can do is Imogen could log into the system, but I'll just do it as myself and mark those as checked in. So when they're checked in, we can say the location that they're checked in at. So let's say they've gone up to Ward 2, which is where they wanted to go, and we can hit save on that. So now it's saying, okay, they're no longer with Imogen, they're on Ward 2, and when I go back to my bed board and look at it, it's now enabled this icon to alert me the fact that the drugs are ready. And if I wanted to go and then mark those as actually having been given to the patient or a patient's relative, I can do that, hit save, and the icon will disappear. We're done with that series of work now. So from an outpatient and inpatient perspective, those are some of the features that we've added. What I'm going to do is just hop back over to the slideshow now, and we're going to go into a coffee break.
Hello everyone, and thank you for continuing to join us today. So hopefully you've got tea and coffee at the ready. So I'm just going to talk you through some other enhancements that have come into Compucare. So just launching into my Compucare. So the first one that I'm going to start off with is something that was actually available in Compucare 7. So for those customers that had 7, obviously are now on to 8, might be familiar with multimodality. So essentially what we've done is we have added that feature into Compucare 8, but we've rebranded it a little bit. So it's now called multi-bookings. And essentially what this means is for those hospitals who quite often patients come in to see the hospital, obviously they might be coming in for multiple different appointments while that they're in. So without having to do manual bookings for each one, so it might be that they need to see the consultant, they might need to go for a scan or a blood test. So what you can do is we can then put configurations in the system, and Compucare is then going to do the legwork for you, so you don't have to do that manually. So just showing you how that works. So for those of you who use the Next Free, this is probably going to look quite familiar. So essentially is if you go to the outpatient Next Free multi-booking, so I've just got mine pinned down here. So I'm just going to select that now. So essentially what it's then displaying me with is how I'm going to put my configurations in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the first one that I'm looking for. So this particular patient is coming in for cardiology. So that's my specialty that I'm going to look for. Obviously then as I'm going to do is I'm going to work through obviously lots of different fields that Compucare is then going to help as it's then trying to find these bookings. So for this one in particular, obviously they're coming in for seeing a clinician. So I could select any clinician, and obviously Compucare is then going to find which cardiology clinician is available. But for this particular example, I've got a particular clinician in mind. So I'm just going to select my clinician there. I'm then also then going to set the duration for those. So for this particular one, I'm going to say 30-minute appointment. And then I can also then set my minimum and maximum wait times. Obviously, because this is going to be the first appointment, I'm not really going to set that there for you. So I'm going to put that one in, and then I'm going to add in my next appointment. So for this one, I want the patient to go to a cardiology assessment room, and they're going to be using the treadmill. So I'm just going to set that one up as well. So this would be under the room. There we go. So I'm just going to put that one in there. And for this particular appointment, it's going to be around 45 minutes. But obviously, because the patient's already come in and seen the clinician, I'm then going to set my minimum and maximum wait times. So maximum wait time of 10 minutes, just to make sure that they've got time to leave the appointment and obviously move on to the next one. But I don't want it lasting any longer than 30 minutes on that one. There we go. So just going to save that, and then I'm going to add my last one. So the patient's then going to come back and see the same clinician after they've been on the treadmill. So I'm just going to type that one in there. So I'm going to select my clinician as I have done before. And for this one it is then, I'm just going to put in another 30-minute appointment. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my wait time. So for this particular one, they've been on the treadmill. They might want to get some food before they go to see the clinician again. So I'm going to say the minimum of 60 minutes, but a maximum of 90. There we go. So I'm just going to save that there. So as you can see, I've now got my configurations of these are the bookings that I'm wanting to, and obviously my minimum and maximum wait time. So obviously when Compucare is then looking for these particular appointments, it's then going to go based on these. So one of the things that you can do obviously in this screen, as you can see on the right hand side, we've actually got some saved configurations. So if you have the same set of bookings that you tend to do on a regular basis, you can pin those on your configuration. So obviously you can pin those there, or you can pin them on the home screen as well. So I've just got a cardiology assessment, which is essentially this configuration that I've just showed you from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select finish. And then what Compucare has done is it's pulled through the appointments that are available. So I'm then going to look at that and say, okay, is that okay for me? Yeah, I think those times I'm happy with those. So I'm then going to select the patient that I'm going to book the appointments for. There we go, and I'm just going to select my episode of care. There we go. So if I select my billing episode here, what it will do is it will then cascade through to all of the other bookings for you. So I'm just going to put this through as a self-pay. There we go. So I just need to create the new billing episode. So purchase of self. There we go, and defaulting my contract in for me. So I'm just going to save that there. So obviously I can fill in all of the additional information if I want. If I do, then obviously that's going to then pull through to those bookings when they're being saved. So I'm just going to create those appointments there. So as I select create, as you can see, what Compucare does is it's obviously then going to book those appointments for me. So I can see the linked appointments up at the top, and I can work my way through them. I can just double check that everything's all fine. All of the information's there. I can then obviously add in any additional information if I need to. So these will just work like their standard outpatient bookings, but obviously they're linked because you've booked them through the multi-booking functionality. So when I select save, we're going to get a new enhancement that's then popped up. So obviously multi-bookings has been around for quite a few builds now, but one of the enhancements that we've put in this autumn release is these what next boxes. Obviously you see them throughout Compucare already anyway, but unfortunately the multi-bookings didn't quite have it already. So what we've done is obviously added the what next box. So we do have the ability to send the notification, so obviously SMS if we wanted to send that to the patient, and obviously then the main one is obviously printing that letter. So I'm just going to select my letter that I wanted to print. So again, one of the other enhancements that we've added in for multi-bookings in particular is the ability to see all of the appointments for that day. So if I just zoom this out a little bit more, so what you can see from here is you can see all of my bookings that I've booked. We'll see the time, the locations, and who they are with as well. So this is something that's just come through. So rather than having to have one letter per appointment, we can now put them all onto one for you, so you only give the patient one letter, as I'm sure less paper works for everyone. So that's something new that's now obviously come into the system, which will be quite nice for those of you that are using the multi-bookings. Lovely. So if I'm just going to cancel out of this one now. So one of the other things that we have introduced in the autumn release is the ability to track the patient's location around the hospital. Obviously, hospitals rather large, and there's lots and lots of different places that the patient may be, and especially for those clinicians that are using Compucare, it's a great way for them to understand where those patients are, especially when they are in multiple bookings. So Compucare can do this automatically, so I am just going to show you how this works from an automatically perspective. So looking at some of the patients obviously that I've got coming in today, so I can just see that the patient that I've just booked in, I'm just going to select this one for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to arrive the patient. So when I select Arrive, what I now get is we now get this new option on the What Next box. So essentially this is going to show me, can I update the patient's location? So when I select this option, so because I arrive the patient, so I've got my main reception hat on, and I have arrived the patient at main reception. So currently Compucare's tracked the patient to main reception. Obviously, if it's depending on where the users are logged in, when they do some of these functions, obviously it's going to do it automatically. But if you needed to do it manually, you can do it by doing this function. So location, so I'm going to change the patient, and they've actually gone down to cardiology. There we go. So I'm just going to put that there. And then when I select save, as you can see down here in the reading pane, you can now see that the patient's location is now changed to cardiology, and it's recorded what time that they've been sent there as well. So we have other different ways of changing the patient's location. So obviously, as I've just showed you on the What Next box, great. But we also do have on a right click, you can update the patient location, as you can see here. So obviously, again, that will, if I select that, that's then going to offer you the same screen as we've just seen. So then you can add that patient's location in manually. So if I cancel out of that, the other option that you do get is the ability to clear the patient's location. So it may be that the patient's left the hospital, they might have gone away for lunch and come back, or they might have just left for the day and they're not coming back for any of their appointments. And obviously, if you want to clear the patient's location, so it's not tracking at all and you can't see where the patient now is, you can obviously clear that out and it's going to clear it all out for you. So that's a new function that we've come in. One of the reasons why we've got some of this enhancements in is the ability that if you have any call-in screens, Compucare can now link to some of those call-in screens, obviously for patient tracking and calling patients to particular rooms and departments as well. So that's a new kind of functionality we've got from an interface perspective. We can link some of these in now. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leave my main Compucare here, and I'm just going to log in on behalf of my as if I was a consultant. So I'm just going to move this over here. So I'm just logging in as Dr. Smith, and I'm going to show you the Clinicians View. So let me just put that in. There we go. So obviously, as we're logging in, what we can see when we log in as if you were the consultant or the clinician, it's taking me directly to the person area. So this is something that was changed in quite a few builds, but essentially this is showing you obviously have to go through the home area and then back to theirs. So what I'm going to show you is the Clinicians View. So the Clinicians View has been around for a few builds now, but essentially the reason why we put the Clinicians View in is for clinicians that are actually using the system. We wanted to try and make it a little bit easier for them to be able to complete their consultation notes, if they wanted to order any additional scans, any drugs that they wanted to order. So essentially what we've tried to do is done a cut down screen that's going to make it as easy as possible for them when they're actually using Compucare to fill all this information in. So essentially this is a new module. Obviously, if it's something that you are interested in looking at, feel free to get in touch, and obviously we're more than happy to do a bit more of a in-depth demo obviously on this particular function. But yeah, so essentially how this works, as I've been talking about the patient location from a consultant, so obviously I'm obviously logged in as Dr. Smith, and this is all of her bookings that are coming through today. I can see down here that the particular patient that I'm selected is actually in the cardiology department. So that's great. So I can see that if my clinic's running a little bit early, but I know that the patient's there, I can actually call them in a little bit early. So I'm just going to select this one here. So obviously I've got my patient that's arrived. If the clinician wanted to change the patient location for whatever reason, so they might have sent them down to pathology or something like that, I can then obviously change that from up here as well. But essentially all that we can now see is the tracking details throughout the system. So I'm just going to do is I'm going to select the patient just so you can see the other side of the Clinicians View. There we go. So this is what essentially the main screens are looking like. So what we've done, obviously, as I mentioned before, we've got a bit of a cut down version. So the main information that we're wanting the clinician to fill in is any actual procedures. So have they filled in, have they completed any procedures while they're in their consultation today? If they have, they obviously can put those on there, and then it does the charges and obviously everything else in the background. Any of their observations, their findings and notes, they can obviously complete that in there. This is a smart text box, so again, so around the abbreviations that you can put those in there too. And obviously then outcome the appointments. Obviously that's one of the main things that we're wanting them to do. So one of the new features that came in a few builds ago was you are able to default the clinical form for the clinicians to fill in. So if they have a standard form that they always fill in when they have their consultants, you can get that to default in, and then that comes in straight, essentially just where this box is here, for them to fill in. If it doesn't, obviously, you do have the ability to do it from this side. So these are the quick links that I mentioned before. So obviously we've got the forms, as I mentioned, if they've got any current medication, if the clinician's prescribing them any drugs or pharmacy items. If they're adding any allergies, so the patient might have come in and said that they've now got an allergy to aspirin, this can be added in from this screen as well. And obviously if they need any follow-up orders, so scans, any pathology tests and all of that kind of stuff. If you don't have these modules licensed, obviously those are just not then available for you. But essentially this is the clinician's view, and we've just tried to make it as easy as possible for the clinician that's now using it. So one of the things that while I'm in this screen and mentioning around the forms is we have added some new enhancements around the forms themselves. So I'm just going to add a form quickly. So I'm just going to select the form that I want. There we go. And I'm just going to quickly add this information in as we are working through. So essentially what we have done with these forms is we've added a little bits of extra functionality just to make it a little bit easier for the users, but also the consultants when they're actually recording some of this information to see what's going on and what are the bits that they really need to be paying attention to. Okay. So one of the new ones that we have got is, as you can see a little bit down here in the greyed out bit, is the ability against the form component that you can actually put some guidance text or a tooltip, which however you want to call it. So essentially against the form component, there is now that option to be able to put the guidance text. So it might be that you've got a particular question that you want the user or the clinician to fill out when they're speaking to the patient, but you want to actually make sure that you give a little bit more information as to the context of the question or anything like that, or if there's something in particular that they need to be looking at. So we now have the ability to do that as well, which is great, because before you'd have to put it in the title, which then gets really, really messy. So it's now sitting underneath, nice and easy, and you can obviously then add those in. So that's a free text box. You can add in whatever you would like. So there we go. So then I'm just going to select save there. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump onto the patient's record quickly, and we're just going to have a look at their forms. There we go. So we can just see that we've got this particular patient's got lots of different forms that we've got moving on. So the form that I've literally just filled in from here. So as you can see in the reading pane now, we now have this basic details up at the top, but essentially it has now time-stamped this form, so when it was created, and then obviously when it was then completed. So this will do this throughout the system, and it's essentially just showing you obviously when it was started, and it might be that forms take a while to complete, and it might be that they don't get completed on the same day, but essentially this now time and date stamps any forms that are now being completed. So one of the other enhancements that we have added around the forms is to make it a little bit clearer when we've got some warnings. So essentially I've got, you can see here, so I've got a News 2 score. So mine's showing that it's a high risk. So when we had the warnings before, they were more like up at the top. They're a little bit difficult to see and to distinguish as to which ones are the problems. So what we've, again, like I mentioned, we tried to make that as easy as possible and put it next to each other to explain this is a problem and this is where they need to look at. And they all now align nice and neatly as well. So you can see which ones are related to which. And obviously, because this is a news score, I can see that they're all changing colours as I'm walking down for my particular patient who's a little bit ill. So essentially, this is what you'll see in any of the reading panes when you're looking at the forms. So we just changed the warnings again, just like I mentioned, to make that a little bit easier and visible to the users. Lovely. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump back to my main Compucare screen. So I'm just going to come out of the check-in. So in the order comms module, we've had a couple of new enhancements that have come in, and I just wanted to highlight a few of them to you. So as I select my order screen, there we go. So we've got quite a few that's sort of going on today. But what I wanted to show you initially is I'm going to add a new order. So one of the things that we had previously, when you are adding charge collection, you had to manually select each service request and add the requesting clinician. Now, what it will do is it will default in based on the clinician that's against the associated booking. So as you can see, obviously my booking has Dr. Smith, as I've been sort of working with already, and I can see my 3 orders that I've got down here, and they've already defaulted these in. So I don't have to manually go into each one now and change that requesting clinician. So it's going to default in from the first one. So obviously, hopefully from that, it just makes it a little bit easier for you when you're adding some of these charge collection, these service request collections, because they could be quite big. So that's just a new function that we've come in just to try and make that a little bit easier and less manual for you. So I'm just going to come out of that one. So one of the things that we have got is the ability in orders, obviously for those of you who use it quite often, we do have the ability to clinically link orders. So I've got quite a few that are sort of sitting here at the moment. So I've got some that's come in for John Adams today. I've then had a couple that have come in yesterday. So essentially, when you're linking these appointments, in previous bills up until sort of this one that's been released, you could only unlink at certain stages, and that was causing a few issues for maybe some of those who have PACS interfaces and that kind of thing, that sometimes those linked appointments need to be unlinked because they're not appropriate for that. And obviously when that was coming back in from the interface, it was causing a bit of a problem. So what we've done is we've essentially now enhanced the system for the ability to unlink at any stage. So I've got a couple that I've got already linked. So I've got 2 that's awaiting reporting. So I'm just going to select these 2 here. So awaiting reporting, so they've already been completed. We're just waiting for the report come. I can obviously unlink those from there. So obviously that then just unlinks them. Great. And then I've also got these that have come through and they're just at requested stage. So the appointment's been scheduled, but then I'm thinking, no, they don't need to be linked. So then I'm going to unlink those. So essentially it just shows you from there that we have got the ability to unlink at lots of different stages now. So hopefully that's not going to cause problems with interfaces and that kind of thing. So one of the other enhancements that we have added, so this is particularly sort of focused with some of the clinicians that are actually using the system, is when they're looking at the orders in the reading pane, when you have results, it can make it a little bit difficult to see the linked orders. So these were sort of crammed on top of each other, making it a little bit difficult. So essentially what we've done is we've now added tabs into here. So as you can see, I'm now on the results tab and I can switch across to the linked orders. So I can then see that this has actually got another order that's then related to it. What Compucare will do is obviously it will remember. So if I came out of this screen and then went back in again, Compucare is going to remember to stay onto the linked orders for me. So again, it's just trying to make it a little bit easier to see the important information in particular, especially with these orders. So finally, probably looking at the orders, and one of the other enhancements that we've got is some ability to do some configurations. So you are now able to edit the layout of the reading pane. So obviously you can pick and choose which bits that you want to see and which bits that you don't. So you can obviously hide some of those. You do have the ability to set this differently depending on whether a particular user is in clinical mode, so obviously focusing particularly on your clinicians. You can actually hide some information that maybe a clinician doesn't necessarily see, but the standard users would normally see. So we do now have this ability to configure the reading panes as well for you. So again, hopefully that's going to make that a lot easier to see. So finally, so before I move out of the orders, so this enhancement is actually available in lots of other screens. So it's not just the orders, but because I'm in here, it gives me a nice way to show it to you. So as you can see, obviously all of my bookings that are sort of floating around here are grouped by the date. So this is obviously when they've been requested. So we can see at the top, this is where they've been requested by. But we have added some additional functionality to this. So mine's obviously grouped by the day, could do it by the month or the year. Obviously day's probably going to be more applicable. You're going to have lots of things coming on. But what we have added to is the ability to set it by the relative dates. So obviously this is now going to show me which one's being requested today, yesterday, Monday, last week, last month, that kind of thing. So again, it's obviously either or. You can set which one that you prefer to use. But again, this is available in lots of the other screens, so like your booking screens and that kind of thing. So it's obviously not just in the orders, but just because I'm in here makes it a little bit easier to show you. Yeah, so obviously that should be great, and then you can sort of use those as needed. Perfect. So one of the other things that we have come across as becoming maybe a little bit of a problem, like to some degree, is obviously if you have users having access to the system, majority of the time that they're employed, they tend to stay for quite a while. But how do we cater for those temporary users that are coming in, and they might only be in for a week, but we need to make sure that obviously they have access to the system and that they can then have all the information that they need. So what we've done is we've now added the ability to add a temporary user. Obviously, I'm set up as a system administrator, so I have the access to do this. Again, this is a security role, so you can set up whether users are able to do that. Obviously, you don't want to set that up for everyone, but again, that's just around the security aspect of that. But just showing you how to use it. So if I just search for temporary user, so it's just going to pull me up with the screen that we've got. So starting up at the top. We've got the ability, so these again is just a drop down, so I can say whether they're a nurse, a theatre practitioner, or both. So I'm just going to set mine as both for now, and then I'm just going to fill in some information. Lovely. So I'm just going to put obviously my name, obviously the user's name. I'm then going to set how many days I want the expiry. Obviously, if they are working a little bit longer, you can obviously set those from here. But I'm just going to set mine for 7 days. Location, so mine's obviously defaulting in what my user's set up as, but this particular user is going to be in theatre. So I'm just going to put them down as a theatre. So then I'm just going to add a security role. So I've got one set up from here. So you don't need to add a security group and role. You can just use either or. But essentially what these are set up with is against a group, you can set up whether this group can cater for the temporary users. So can temporary users be selected with this group essentially? So you probably set up your own group just for these, so then you can keep track. And what you can see on this side is I can actually see that these are the ones that I've added recently as well. So I can see my list that's popping up here. Obviously from here I've got my role that it then relates to. That's why it's defaulting in. It's not asking me to add in another security role. So I'm just going to save that from there. So obviously on the information, it's showing me this is when the expiry of this user's account is then going to happen. So I'm just going to save that now. So what Compucare is then going to do is then going to give you a temporary password. So I'm just going to make a note of this quickly so I can show you what happens next. So essentially what Compucare does is the username is the first 4 letters of the surname, and then obviously then it will do a number based on how many of these are already in the system. And then it will create the password is a word at random with obviously the number again, and it will put a capital in there as well for you just to try and make it a little bit safer, so you could say these over the phone. There we go. So I've just got that popped down. There we go. So I'm just going to jump into another Compucare. So I'm just going to scroll this one over here. So I'm just going to show you what happens now. So I'm just going to add my username and password into here. There we go. And I'm just going to log in. And what Compucare is then obviously going to do is then going to ask me to change the password. So I'm then just going to change my password, and then it will let me log into the system. There we go, lovely. So obviously now I've got access to the system. If I wanted to have a look at some outpatient bookings, I can then obviously select those as I'm going through. So essentially it's then just giving the user access to the system based on obviously the security role and group that you've just given them. Obviously what Compucare is then going to do is based on the expiry date. So obviously, for instance, I said that it was a 7 days. So after that 7 days is up, Compucare is going to automatically put that account on stop, and then the Compucare service will deactivate the login details as well for the account, so they can't then log in later. So obviously, you don't need to worry about that. Compucare will then do that in the background for you. While this user is activated, if you, for instance, that you tried to create another temporary user with the same name, what Compucare is then going to do is then going to sort of pop up and say, we have already got a temporary user for this name. Did you want to change the login details, as in the password, or did you want to create a new one? So it's just again trying to check that we don't have duplicates that's floating around, and making sure that you've got the right information that you need. Lovely. So I'm just going to cancel out of that, and I'm going to go back to the main screen. So that's how you now add the temporary users, and hopefully, obviously, for those of you who have quite a few temporary users that are coming in, that's going to make it a lot easier for you to use. And obviously, again, give them access to Compucare, because that's the main thing. So what I'm going to probably move into last is around some of the billing changes that they've had come in. So we had a new, so probably billing function rule, kind of a combination of the two. Often what happens with some purchasers like Bupa, they will publish different categories of how they're going to pay for the hospital's fees, the surgeon fee, the anaesthetist fee. Before we see this build, there wasn't really a way that was going to make that easy for the hospital to do. So what we've done in the autumn release is enhance the system for you to be able to add those categories with different for charging purposes, and again obviously that around the contract. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of how to do that. So I'm just going to have a look at my procedures quickly. There we go, lovely. So I'm just going to select a procedure that I've been looking at before. There we go. So I've just got an arthroscopy that I'm then going to take a look at. So essentially what I've done against this particular procedure is we've now got these new fields that have now just fallen on the left-hand side. So one of the things just to bear in mind is in I think it's in 8.30, but in probably the next major release, we are actually renaming these fields just to make them a little bit clearer as to which ones they are. So we're starting at the top. So this is obviously relating to the hospital. The next one down is relating to the surgeon. Obviously this one is around the anaesthetist. So again, we're going to relabel those fields a little bit clearer as to what they relate to, but essentially functionality is still going to work exactly the same. So for this example, so for this arthroscopy, the hospital can charge a CRM1, and the same for the surgeon. However, the anaesthetist can only charge an inter. So essentially, so what this is obviously going to do is when I'm adding this procedure to the booking, these are then going to be taken into account. So one of the things just to bear in mind is against the procedure, if you have charge collections already set up, Compucare are going to take this as a priority. So it's just something to be aware that if you're trying to use a combination of the two, you might just have to be wary of which one's taking priority. Obviously from these fields, they take priority from the first one down. So obviously the hospital goes first, then the surgeon, then the anaesthetist. So it's just one of those things, obviously, when you're setting these, just to be a little bit careful as to what's there. So Compucare then make sure that it's actually pulling out the correct prices. So obviously we've got this in against the procedure, but essentially then what you're going to need to do is set this actually against the contract itself. So I'm just going to come out of the procedure and look at the contracts. So I'm just going to scroll across to my contract. So I've actually got one set up for Bupa. So just find my Bupa contract. There we go. Just set this one here. And essentially what we've now got is we've got this little toggle just down here at the bottom that is then going to explode the procedure group and category charges. So essentially what this is doing is it's looking that if this procedure has those fields completed, it's then going to pull those through for you. So you don't obviously then have to manually manipulate that after. So that's essentially what the toggle's looking for. So again, so against your contracts, if you're using this function, you need to make sure that that toggle's then set. So just showing you how that actually works in practice, I'm just going to select a booking. So obviously I'm going to use an inpatient booking, but again, this works for outpatients and obviously surgical as well. So I've got my patient that's coming in for a day case appointment at the moment. So I'm just going to edit that and I'm going to add the actual procedure. So obviously this is just for the actuals. So obviously it doesn't really take into account when it's planned. So I'm going to add my actual procedure against here. So again, I'm just going to put my arthroscopy on. There we go, and I'm just going to select that. And as you can see now on the far side, Compucare has now recognised that these have got procedure charges that are associated to this particular procedure. And as you can see, I've got 3 that then relate to that, and they are different ones as well. So obviously that's great, it's pulling through as expected. So if I just save that from there, so you can see that's now. So I'm just going to save the appointment. And I'm just going to show you obviously from a charging perspective how that actually looks. So if I just select my charges from here, as you can now see, since I've added the procedure with those different charges, I can now see that they're actually gone against the patient's booking as set up against the contract as well. So obviously these are the 3 that has been set up in the background. So this is essentially how it then pulls into for Compucare. So hopefully obviously for those purchasers that have these different charges, hopefully this enhancement will make it a lot easier for some of your billing as well for you. So obviously this is all on the knowledge base as well, so there will be a nice little article on there to explain a little bit more about how to use it and what you need to sort of take into account, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a preview as to actually how it's working and obviously how it works in practice. Lovely. Okay, so the final thing that I wanted to show you, so this is something that actually came in again quite a few builds ago, but just obviously to show you what obviously we've been working on. So one of the questions hospitals quite often get is how much is this going to cost? So how much is this MRI going to cost? How much is this consultation going to cost? That kind of thing. And even though Compucare's got all of that information in for you, it's a little bit difficult to get that information out. So essentially what we have done is we have added a new feature called the Estimator Tool. So essentially what this is going to do is you're going to add in all of the information that you need, and then obviously the charges that then relate to that, and then Compucare is going to run it through the billing engine and give you an invoice as an estimate that you can then give to the patient to say this is how much this is going to cost, and obviously then they can move them from there. So we have split these between outpatient and inpatient. So I'm going to show you the outpatient as an example. So the only difference really around the inpatient is obviously things like your fixed price packages and that kind of thing. But apart from that, they're essentially the same. So I'm just going to show you essentially how this works. So I'm going to type my patient in. So one of the things that you just to bear in mind as a sort of a caveat around these is that even though obviously we've put this enhancement in, this isn't to replace your CRM system, your sales system. This is essentially for patients that are already in the system. So that's essentially what we're attributing it to. If you're still using those sales systems, you can still get the information out, but this is not to replace those type of systems. Obviously, those are still needed from that aspect. Lovely. Okay, so as I'm working my way down, obviously date, site, obviously this can differ depending if you have multiple sites. So clinician, if you know the clinician, so if a particular patient is saying that they want to come and see this clinician, you can add those in. If you do, obviously what it's going to do is then going to do some of the automatic charging Compucare would do in the background around your attendance charges and that kind of thing. Compucare is going to default those in for you, so you don't have to remember to put those to the invoice. If you don't know the clinician, not a problem. Leave it blank and you can just add those bits on later if you want. So obviously purchasers, this is really, really important to make sure that you put in the purchaser in. So Compucare then knows where to pull these charges from and how much they're going to cost. Obviously mine's just defaulted in the outpatient contract, but again, you can select the contracts that you need. So what Compucare is going to do is essentially it's going to run through those billing rules as if you were billing the patient normally. So these bits are really, really important to make sure that you put down. So obviously got the main information in, so I'm just going to add some charges on here. So again, obviously if you've got any barcodes set up, you can use that obviously from a scanning, but if not, you can just search in. So I'm just going to add a consultation fee. There we go, so I'll just take that one. Obviously, if you wanted to add multiple quantities, you can change that from there. So I'm just going to add that in there. And then I'm just going to add my next one. So I'm going to go for an MRI hip. And we're going to go for the right one. Lovely, I'm going to add that next one in. And I'm just going to finish with a full blood count. There we go. So one of the things just to bear in mind is when you've added these charges on here, this gross amount that's here is how much is your standard pricing. So obviously what's on your charge master. So if I was coming in off the street without any contracts, this is essentially where these prices are being pulled from. The reason why we put these contracts in is because when I click estimate, that's what it's then going to do, is run through that contract and give me those charges then related. So it's just something to just be wary of, that just because these prices are here doesn't mean that that's the end result. So adding my charges in, I'm just going to select estimate. There we go. So what Compucare has obviously done, it's then essentially given me an invoice. So I've got an estimate water stamped over the top of it, so you can clearly see that it is an estimate, it's not a normal patient invoice, and it's just pulled through obviously the information that you've already got, and it's then added the charges. So this one just down here at the bottom, obviously I didn't add that, so that was an automatic attendance charge that we had already had set up in the system, so that has Compucare's already pulled that across for us. So this is one that's set up around the new appointments. So again, obviously, if you have those in there, Compucare will pull it across for you. And then essentially what it's done is then give me the total down here at the bottom to say, this is how much all of these things are going to cost if the patient's then going to come in. So obviously from here, you can print it out, you can give it to the patient. If you print it from the system, obviously like anything else, it stores in the correspondence record. So you can pull that back later if you want to. But essentially, obviously, that's what it's going to do is you can give that to the patient. Obviously, you can PDF it, that kind of thing. But you can give it to the patient, give them an estimate as to obviously how much these services are going to cost. So the Estimator tool as a whole is quite new, obviously. We're probably classing it, maybe it's in its sort of phase 1 aspect. So some of the new things that we're hoping to add in is around the ability to take a payment against this estimate. So obviously patients like, yeah, great, I want to come in, I want to book these appointments. You're going to want to take a deposit. So we wanted to try and get that into the system, make that as easy as possible for the user, and also obviously making those bookings after. So again, you filled in quite a lot of this information. How can we get those bookings to then be added from there? So this is something that we're obviously looking at working at adding in at a later date, but obviously it's in the system. Feel free, use it as much as you want now. If you have any feedback on it, we'd love to hear from you. Obviously, it's going to make it a little bit easier if there's particular things that you'd like or that is missing. Let us know, and obviously we can get that sort of added in as a phase 2. But yeah, so obviously it's there, it's ready for you. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you if you do have any comments on it, and then we can get those added in. But yeah, so I think that is enough from me for my demos. So I think I'm going to hand back to Stuart, and he's going to give you a sneak preview of the patient portal.
Okay, thanks, Imogen. That's great. Just before I go into the patient portal, I'm just going to pick up on one of the questions that's come through. So we've had a question through about the default forms on the Clinicians View. So just opening up my Compucare system again to expand on something that Imogen's already showed you. When I go onto the person area and I open up Dr. Jones, which I had previously, when I go and edit her record and look at that clinician role, we were dealing with the default appointment lengths before, but just below that, we have the default first appointment form and the default follow-up appointment form. So you can see I've just set the assessment form here. It could be orthopedic assessment. We could have lots of different forms set up within the system. We have had a question through about whether we would look to expand this in a similar way to the above, so we could have different forms for different treatment function services or contact types. And if that's the feedback from the customer base as to the direction that we need to take this feature, then yes, absolutely, we can look at that in a future release. I think just to show what this assessment form looks like in practice when it's embedded, what I've got is Dr. Jones. Go on to the Clinicians View, which is what Imogen showed you. There's the patient we booked in earlier. And as I launch into that start appointment now, what it does is it loads in. So whereas on Imogen's it had just the notes field, procedure and outcome, now what it's done is put that form in as default, so we can get all of those. What's the history of this complaint, any other measurements we might want to take, what the treatment plan is going to be, and so forth. And otherwise, exactly as Imogen said, you can then go up to this add forms feature and be able to add as many other ones as you like. If you're also doing an EQ5D, or you're doing a PROMS questionnaire or something like that for maybe the Oxford HIP score or something. So just to show that, but that was all. So what we'll do is we'll just come away from Compucare and I will launch up into our patient portal. So here we have the login screen. When this comes out to you, we're expecting this to be released in around January. So across the top here, we've got the address of the website. Mine's a great big long development website that I'm logging into at the moment. We would obviously expect this to be more consolidated in terms of showing, you know, hospital.com/patient portal as to whatever your website address is going to be. So this is what the patient hits first. We're expecting that in Compucare, you'll change your appointment letters to reference the fact that the patient can manage their appointment online. You could include the URL for that hospital.com/patient portal to direct them to here. So the first thing that will happen is they'll have to come and register. So when they register, they've got to know their patient ID, which is the Compucare system number, not to be confused with their PAS number if you're an NHS site, or their NHS number or anything like that. It is the Compucare one. So again, we'd expect that to be included in the letter. They've got to know their date of birth. So again, we're just checking a few more details to make sure it is them. They can set their own password. So again, they can pop that in there, and then they can pick how they want to verify with this. So we're using two-factor authentication. So they've got to have the details that they know, and they've got to have access to either the email address that we have on file for them on the patient record or the mobile phone number. Once that happens, they get sent a verification code, just like we all do when we log into government portals, you know, change our password on eBay or whatever it might be, and then they can set up log it in for the next time. So they're assigned a username, and they can then pop their password in, and then they can hit login. So when this loads up, this is how the system currently looks, but we do have several work items going through at the moment between now and January. So one of the things that we're looking at is being able to include more customer branding within here. So you can see at the moment mine is called Rose Dover Hospital for whatever reason, and that would be where your hospital name would display. But in terms of the top of this is currently blue, and there's no real reference to your hospital logo. So that's what we're looking to change in here to allow you to brand this up so that when the patient lands in here, it looks like something that belongs to your business. So let's start with the details at the top. My patient that I've logged into is one of our developers, James Brynan, who's been working on this. And up at the top, they've got an ability to change the theme. So we do have a dark and a light theme. I think I'll just stick with the light theme because it's prettier to me. And what I can do though is go into the account maintenance on here. So a couple of things that the patient's able to do. One, if they want to reset their password, they can do that. And on the login screen, there was a forgotten password link they could do, and it would email them. But they also have the ability to set two-factor authentication. So although we check that verification code when they first registered, if they wanted to set themselves up to we just pop the patient's password in again here. If they wanted to have an SMS login code sent to them every single time they logged in to secure the patient portal a bit further, they could choose to do that. And likewise, they could choose to use one of the App Store apps for doing this. So either Google's Authenticator or the Microsoft Authenticator app. So that would token round with the authorized codes for this or allow them to approve it. But I'm not going to set that. I'm just going to go back to the main screen. So across the top here, we've got the patient's name and the photograph we hold for them in Compucare if we hold one. We've got some basic contact details so they can kind of see who they're logged in as, and there's an ability for them to be able to update their details. So as I go on to here, we haven't allowed them to update their photo because who knows what avatars or holiday pics we'll end up with. And we don't currently allow them to change their name. They would have to contact the hospital to be able to do that. We do let them set their address, so if they move house, you can come into here and you can fill out a new address or new contact numbers. You can fill out new next of kin details and things like that. And all of that replicates straight back into Compucare in real time. So one of the other things, just going back to the home screen, is we've got these various cards along the top that are showing them the most recent important information. So the first one here is they've got an upcoming appointment. So they're booked in on the 19th at 3:10. They're coming in to see this consultant. They've got the ability to add that as a iCal invite directly into their calendar on their phone or on their PC or whatever they're using. And we are looking in the release of this that comes out in January to expand some of these details. So you can see this is coming into the point, which is where our office park is based, but essentially would be the details of your particular hospital site. But at the moment, it doesn't give them any contact details of that hospital or how to get there. So again, that's something that we'll be putting in before this comes out in January. So it's letting them see their upcoming appointments. They can drill into that and they can see a history of all the appointments. So again, this patient's been used quite a lot for testing, but you can filter by date. You can sort by the type of appointment that you're looking for. So if you're only bothered about when are my next inpatient stays, you can see all of those. And they also have a request a booking link up the top here. So at the moment, we haven't enabled this for direct booking. It is to essentially request a callback. So they can put in roughly what the issue is, the fact that they've looked online and would like to see Dr. Jones or whoever it is, and when roughly they'd like a callback. And that will fire through to whatever email address we set up behind this. So it might be reservations@hospital.com or whatever your email address is. In the future, we are looking at how we might enable direct booking and how, because we also have the payment part on this, how we might also take a deposit for that booking. But there are a few more questions that we need to run past our user group before we do that, particularly around which types of appointments can patients pre-book. You obviously wouldn't let them book directly into an MRI scanner or a CT scanner or something like that. You might be happy for them to book their own physio, but you might not be happy for them to book themselves directly with the orthopedic surgeon and things like that. So there's just a few bits we need to iron out on that, but that is a future feature that we're looking at. So anyway, that's appointments dealt with. Let's go off and have a look at correspondence on the right here before we do the financial side. So what we're essentially able to do is show them recent correspondence. And here's just a copy of a letter that's been sent. If I just hop back to the patient portal, there is a correspondence section on the side here, and then again you can see all the different letters that have been sent and they can reprint them. So the idea of this was we already had a patient portal some years ago, and we've taken the opportunity to rewrite it and restyle it, but also add some extra features. And one of the things that was missing from it really was an ability to be able to send the patient's letter up to this portal for them to securely go and get and read. So with Compucare as it currently stood, you would have the ability to print the letter and send it via Royal Mail, which most people are trying to get away from that. You would have the ability to email it directly to the patient, so their Hotmail or Gmail address or whatever it is that you're emailing it to. But what that would have done is it would have sent it as a PDF attachment, and to some IT departments, some IG officers probably more likely, that was deemed to be insecure. And because it was an unencrypted attachment containing patient identifiable data. So what we'd be looking to do, and we've already built this into Compucare in preparation for this portal coming out, is that we can, instead of sending emails to the patient, we can, with an attachment, we can now send them an email directing them to the portal. Then they can come in here and get that letter, give it a read and print it out if that's what they want to do with it. But then it's entirely leaving it securely within the portal unless they choose not to. So again, nice little new feature coming through. And then what we'll do is we'll have a look at payments. So you can see here, it's telling me there's a balance on this account. Actually, this one's in credit now, but because I've made a few test payments. But what we'll do is we'll just say we want to make a payment, and it will show all the transactions that are self-funded, not the insurance ones, on this patient's account. So this is a test patient and has been used lots and lots of times, but let me just filter it down and we'll just look at invoices. So we can see here are the self-pay invoices, and it tells me the ones that need paying. So this one here needs paying. So let's go and have a look at that. And the first thing it does is says, well, okay, what are you doing? Are you paying the full balance or are you just paying a bit of that? So I'll say the full balance and I'll continue on to our payment page. So for those customers that use our debit and credit card link, this is entirely linked into that. So what's popping up here is PXP Financial's iframe for taking that secure payment. So again, none of these card details are ever getting stored in Compucare. The patient can either use one of their registered cards that we've then hold the secure token for, or they can register an entirely new card through this and hit pay now. Once they've done that, that card will be tokenized and could be used by them later on in if there was another transaction outstanding. I won't go through and pay this because I'm not fully linked up to the payment gateway, and I'll just come out of that for the moment. And the last thing on here is an ability to be able to print these. So any invoices that they want to print, they can come in here and they can go and print that invoice out. So I think overall, we've got a good start here at something to demonstrate. We've got a number of items coming through just to finish it up for its first release. We've already demonstrated this to a number of clients and got their feedback on it, so we're building all of that in. And then we'll let you know when it comes out in January. So that's really all I was going to show for now. And then in terms of the presentation, I think we'll move over to questions. So let's just flip over. Okay, so my colleagues who've been managing this side of it should have put some questions up here. So we've had a few through, so thank you for those. So the first one here is there a dashboard for the KPIs? So obviously we showed the outpatient and inpatient, referral to first outpatient, and decision to admit to first inpatient appointments that can be monitored. It can be used here for more than NHS patients. You can use it on self-funded, private insured, embassy, and have different KPIs for each. You don't have to just use it on NHS ones. And in terms of, is there a dashboard for it? No, there isn't currently. How it's been designed for its first release is to allow you against that episode of care source to be able to set what the KPI days are, to record against bookings by the bookings users when they haven't been able to offer a booking within the preferred KPI and the reason why, and the ability from our report generator to be able to produce a report of that information. There isn't currently a sort of KPI breach date dashboard within the system, but that is something that if clients felt that was needed, that we could look at and see how that fitted into the overall workflow. It's most likely going to be something that would be needed on the waiting list app to be able to show you the people who are waiting for an appointment to be booked, so that you could order that data by those that needed to be booked soonest, so that you weren't at risk of breaching those KPIs. So we'll take that as an action, and we'll work up some ideas on it and then present that to the user group as we start to consider adding that to the system. Okay, so the next one is, can you change the pathway assigned to a patient, and is there a dashboard view for sites clinical leadership to look at to see if any of the pathway tasks are not getting done? At the moment, what would happen is if you've assigned the pathway to the patient, those tasks are automatically exploded onto the patient's admission. There is an overall pathway app that I haven't shown that you can go into, and you can see all the outstanding tasks. So again, you'd be able to see for your current admissions the ones that aren't getting done. So I think the latter part of that question, the answer is yes. Is it easy to change the pathway once you're already on it? No, it isn't, and that's probably something that needs some thought. So it only ever adds those tasks automatically at the point that you book that patient in with that pathway already set. If you go back and adjust it, it doesn't go and try and delete them out and add new ones in and things like that. So it might be against the individual patient booking and the pathway app against that patient's booking that we might need an ability to change the pathway from there, or to be able to decide what we do, particularly if we're already partway through completing some of those tasks. So we'll take that as feedback from this and see if we can work up some ideas, and again we'll share them via our user group as we come up with those. On patient estimates, is there not a different template? It would help as the user could then send standard T's and C's, etc. Yes, there is. I think in our demo system, we've used the default invoice layout, and it's just watermarked estimate over the top of it. You can have an entirely different estimate layout if that's what you want to do, and you can have it detailed as estimate across the top instead of invoice, and you can have a different set of T's and C's rather than payment details on it. So yes, it can be done. It just hasn't been done for the release of this functionality. Essentially, it will, as standard, if you start using the estimator, use a copy of your invoice with estimate watermarked over it, which suggests that you wouldn't just start using it in your live environment. You'd look at it in test, and then that would probably prompt you to get in touch with us about or create the layout yourself if you're an admin that can do that. So yes, it can be done. It just wasn't on the demo environment. Okay, on the request view, have we considered monitoring against reporting SLAs? This would be great to have. I think we have got some report SLAs that are held behind the scenes on things like the radiology exams that are going through. So we know that we're expecting a CT or an MRI to be reported within 2 days, 3 days, whatever the turnaround time is. I don't think we make those SLAs that visible. I'll have to take that as a way as something to look at and see what we do in that area, and we can put something out about that later. And if we don't make it clear enough at the front end that something's going to breach its SLAs, when you're looking at that list of orders that are going on that are awaiting reporting, we can have a look at that. I think most reports actually are done rather than in Compucare, although you're welcome to do it in there, are actually done in the PAC system and dictated by the radiologist. So it's actually also a case of whether those SLAs need to get reflected through to that system. But yeah, we'll have a look and see what happens there and come back on that one. Okay, and last question on here, when a task is completed, does it timestamp so you can report on those tasks within a pathway? I would have to go and have a look at it. I would imagine that it is timestamping it somewhere, but again, I'll have to have a look and see what it's doing. Obviously, when you select it from the top, I think it is just marking it as complete, but whether there is a date in the background or not that we're either not showing or whether it's being recorded, we'll have to have a look at. So again, we can take that as something to follow up on after the after this webinar to confirm how that works. Again, it would be something that would be great for customers to have a look at in their test environments and to give us some feedback on, because ultimately we don't want to develop things that people don't use. So we just need to finesse it now to make sure it's usable. Okay, so I think we'll just flip over and see if there are any other questions. And it doesn't look like there are. I will just check the Q&A chat as well. And it does look like we've published answers to most of the questions. So I think in terms of this presentation, we said it would run until 3 o'clock. Obviously, if you've seen anything today that you suddenly think of something and you want to ask us, please do come back to us separately and we'll happily answer those. And again, we'll be making the video available for this via our YouTube channel, and we'll send an email out to everyone who's attended today just to give you that link as well. So really just to take this opportunity to thank you for staying with us and going through all of these items. There was quite a lot to show there in quite a lot of different areas, and the next one of these will likely be in the springtime of next year, just to show you the next 3 builds that come out there, so around the March time, I believe. So thank you very much again for joining us on this autumn webinar, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.